Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. I want you to read this when you get home. This is Jesus. They arrived on the other side of the sea in the country of the Gennesaret. As Jesus got out of the boat, a madman from the cemetery came up to him. He lived there among the tombs and graves. No one could restrain him. He couldn't be chained, couldn't be tied down. He had been tied up many times with chains and ropes, but he broke the chains, snapped the ropes. No one was strong enough to tame him. Night and day he roamed through the graves and the hills, screaming out and slashing himself with sharp stones. When he saw Jesus a long way off, he ran and bowed in worship before him, then bellowed in protest. What business do you have, Jesus, Son of the high God, messing with me? I swear to God, don't give me a hard time. Jesus had just commanded the tormenting evil spirit out. Get out of the man. Jesus asked him, tell me your name. He replied, my name is Mob. King James Version says, my name is Legion. Then he desperately begged Jesus not to banish them from the country. A large herd of pigs was browsing and rooting on a nearby hill. The demons begged him, send us to the pigs so we can live in them. Jesus gave the order, but it was even worse for the pigs than for the man. Crazed, they stampeded over a cliff into the sea and drowned. Those tending the pigs, scared to death, bolted and told their story in town and country. Everyone wanted to see what had happened. They came up to Jesus and saw the madman sitting there wearing decent clothes and making sense, no longer a walking madhouse of a man. Those who had seen it told the others what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. At first they were in awe, and then they were upset over the drowned pigs. They demanded that Jesus leave and not come back. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the demon-delivered man begged to go along, but he wouldn't let him. Jesus said, go home to your own people. Tell them your story, what the master did, how he had mercy on you. The man went back and began to preach in the 10 towns area about what Jesus had done for him. He was the talk of the town. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, the preacher's going to preach on. Don't y'all see it up there? Say it. Turn to your neighbor and say it one more time like you really mean it. Y'all waiting on me. Say it one more time. You may be seated. This is Jesus' first trip into Gentile territory. You recall his words when he said, I have come to seek and to save that which is lost. As Jesus enters into this unsaved territory, he is met by a man who is demon-possessed. When one reads the text and how the story ends, you will be able to understand this was a story not so much about a demonic possession or evil, but about a man getting his mind together. Y'all in here? But the crucial verse in the entire text says he was sitting clothed and in his right mind, meaning that at first the man was into something that he could not shake or loose. But after this encounter with Jesus, he is in his right mind. Anyone that has an encounter with the Master, there should be a change in one's life. Anytime you run across Jesus and Jesus taps you on your shoulder, you ought to change your behavior. You ought to change your attitude. There ought to be a change in your life. I can't get nobody to testify in it. There ought to be a change in your life. Therefore, inquiring minds should be asking the question, what happened to his mind? When Jesus confronts the man and asks him what is his name, the man replies, I really don't know who or what I am, so I guess my name is Legion or Mob. Don't you sit there like you don't know what I'm talking about. Somebody in here right now say, I know some Christian folk who, if the truth was to be told, they could call themselves Legion. Some come to church acting all sanctified and saved, but when they leave the walls of the church, I think it's an altogether different story. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. The man says, my name is Legion. We are many, meaning that during the time of the Roman Empire, Legion was the name of the largest single unit in the army, totaling over 6,000 soldiers. Whew. Causing us to understand that this man had so many demons controlling him until every time or everything in his mind is out of his hands, and he says, I really have no control over what is taking place in my life. Is there anybody in here who ever thought that they had no control over what was taking place in their life? Oh, come on, talk to me. I know I haven't preached in a long time, and I'm sick, and y'all got to help me preach this thing. But I want you to understand this afternoon that everybody has lost control over their lives at one time or another. So this man says, my name is Legion. His mind is messed up, for he has been attempting to live a life contrary to whom and what he really is. He has been trying to fit in where he does not belong. He is going crazy over trying to be what he will never, ever, ever, ever be. The problem with a whole lot of us is we try to be what folk want us to be, and we'll never be what folk want us to be. We need to learn how to be what God wants us to be. And when we learn how to be what God wants us to be, our minds will find ourselves in a place of safety. He is going crazy trying to be the other person who he was so supposed to be. His thoughts were dominating his mind, which contradicted his upbringing and his training. He was the opposite of what he was supposed to be based on who he was. Woo! I said he was the opposite of what he was supposed to be based on what he was. He was struggling with who he was supposed to be over against who he was trying to be. Anytime you try to be what you will never be, I can't sing like Robert, but I'll hum along. You can't preach like me, but you preach anyhow. God has given each and every one of us a specific talent to be a minister inside the walls of God's church. I can't do some things like Lisa can do, but I can admire her and pray for her and make sure that she gets everything that she needs in order to work with our children. Y'all don't have to talk. I want you to understand God has a plan for each and every one of us. This man was struggling with who he was supposed to be over against who he was trying to be. he had an opposing thought pattern along with an opposing lifestyle to who he was in his mind, and it had him losing his mind. So he found himself into something that he just couldn't shake a loose. Y'all gonna help me talk this thing. This man says he should have power. Understand? This man says he should have power to rid himself of these demons, but he is powerless to remove them. He has no help nor any strength to overcome this problem. Now, the man is described, he describes himself to Jesus. He replies, my name is Legion. There is an army existing in my mind. You do understand an army exists only to occupy. There's this army occupying space in the mind which does not belong in his mind. There is always wrong trying to occupy your mind. Oh, y'all don't have to talk. There's always wrong trying to occupy your mind. You think I'm lying? Paul says the things that I find myself doing, the things I don't want to do, that's the exact thing that I find myself always doing. Paul says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers in high places. Our mind is always trying to be occupied by the wrong thing. And I know Jesus said, let this mind be in you, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. But there's something occupying this space in this man's mind. He is entertaining thoughts that were unhealthy for him. Y'all sitting there like you don't know what I'm talking about. But we have always entertained some thoughts in our minds that we knew were unhealthy for us. Come on, talk to me. We have always thought of some things that we shouldn't do, but we plan to do anyhow. This man is worrying about that stuff that he can't do anything about. So this is really a story about what can happen to you when you allow opposing authorities to try to occupy space in your mind at the same time. Oh, this is a story of what can happen to any of us when you have too much on your mind, because you have too many things trying to have authority over you. The Bible plainly says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your, and lean not to your own for in all thy acknowledge, and he shall, y'all know the story, direct thy path. Well, does that verse, when you look at it, does it suggest that I don't have anything else going on in my life? The answer is no. The answer is no, but there is a consistent manner of how I should go about it. It means I have given these thoughts the authority in my life. And I'm letting these thoughts share space with God, who said he is the only one who should occupy my mind. And when others things occupy my mind, it will start to dictate my activities. Oh. Too many of us have several things on our mind at the same time, to the point you are almost burned out and undone mentally. Uh-oh. You think I'm lying? Multitasking. Even while you listen to me preach, some of you are texting. Help me, somebody. Some of you are Facebooking, trying to listen. Some of you are Twittering. Some of you even thinking about how you're going to make it through to next week. Your mind is on how will I get gas money? How am I going to pay my bill? You thinking about how you going to deal with your spouse, those kids, that test I got to take, folk on the job, even folk inside the church when I get out of church. But I can still have a lot going on in my life without having a lot going on in my mind. Woo. Meaning you want to be able to look at me or talk to me and know how much I have going on in my life. See, that's why so many of us look so good on Sabbath, even though we've been catching a whole lot of hell, due to the fact that we know that Jesus is on our side. I can't get nobody to testify here. Due to the fact that I know that whatever has been taking place in my life, I still have Jesus on my mind. That's why I don't get depressed about it. Because with Jesus in my life, I know sooner or later he's going to turn this thing around because Jesus never fails. Hello, somebody. I have a lot going on in my life, but I only have Jesus in my mind. So I don't have to pop pills. I don't need antidepressant drugs. I don't have to use sex and need it to feel loved. I have Jesus on my mind. I don't need weed. I have Jesus. Let's make it real. Sometimes I'm confused about stuff, but I do know if God be for me, who in the world can be against me? I know if his eyes on the sparrow, I know he watches over me. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, I got a lot going on in my life, but I have Jesus. Oh, no, now turn to your other neighbor, because that other neighbor didn't say it like you need to say. Neighbor, I've got a lot going on in my life, but I have Jesus in my mind. Give the Lord a hand praise, won't you? Notice now what happens in your life when you have too much on your mind, which doesn't belong there. Now watch this. Look at the text. The text says this man lives in the tomb. Isn't that what the text said? Meaning he's living in isolation. Uh-oh. He's living with dead folk, which means he's living in a place beneath his value. He's running from people and is living around that which cannot see or respond to him. Anytime you find yourself being trapped, help me, Holy Ghost, and you are not around people who love you and are concerned about you, you in a tomb. Look at the text. Look at the text. The Bible tells us not only did he live in tombs, but he also spends time cutting himself. So he tries to relieve his inner pain through outer pain by finding pleasure in using his body as a tool of escape. I think I just said a word. I said he tries to relieve his inner pain through outer pain by finding pleasure in using his body as a tool of escape. This man is cutting himself, doing damage to his body, as a tool of escape. He's trying to get his problems out of his mind by causing physical pain. You cannot relieve physical pain unless you have spiritual relief. Y'all gonna catch that next week. See, I mean, do you use your body as an instrument of escape to not deal with what's going on in your life? And mine as if 2 or 5 minutes of satisfaction will make up for your anguish and hurt. And I'm not just talking about sex, no. I'm talking about cutting yourself. I'm talking about tattoos. I'm talking about drugs. I'm talking about popping pills, doing all kinds of things to your body in an effort to deal with what's going on in your mind. Because sometimes the inability to be in your right mind will cause you to constantly cause you to do self-inflicted pain, and you don't even know what you're doing. Woo. Listen, self-destructible behavior, getting with people who are not good for you and taking advantage of you because you like to hear, oh, you so fine. You just it. And what we fail to realize is all of our children need to be loved. Now, if a child needs to be loved, I think an adult needs to be loved too. Y'all don't have, an adult needs to be loved. Am I right about it? And if you don't get it in the right location, it's going to mess up your mind. But can I give you some good news? It's right there in the text. The text says Jesus came to the place of the Galileans. You missed your shout. I said Jesus came to the place where the man was. You missed your shout. Jesus did not make the man come to where he was. Jesus came to where the man was. Aren't you glad Jesus came to your place of pain? Come on. Aren't you glad that Jesus showed up when you were in trouble? Aren't you glad that Jesus is the one who can touch and can heal you? I tell you, Jesus will meet you in the place of your confusion. While you are looking a mess and trying to help yourself, Jesus is able to supply all your needs. I'm surprised nobody in here is shouting. Because if you're honest and truthful about it, you didn't find Jesus first at church. You didn't find him at Sabbath school. You didn't find him at some conference. You were in your Galilean tomb messing up your life. Cutting on yourself. Drinking yourself in a stupor. Sexting. But Jesus showed up. He reached in your pain area, found that's why you shout the way you shout. But it was just in the nick of time that Jesus met you. Can I sit down or can I talk a little longer? Verse 2 is a summary of the entire story. Go home and read it. Verse 6 tells the story that verses 2 through 5 summarizes. Verse 2 says the reason the man encounters Jesus is because upon seeing Jesus, the man comes out of the tomb. You missed it. I said upon seeing Jesus, the man comes out of the tombs. Look at the text. Jesus did not call him out like he called out Lazarus. Look at the text. Y'all not up in here. Jesus did not call him out. Jesus just shows up on the shore. Nobody brought him out. Watch. The man takes the initiative upon seeing Jesus to bring himself out of what he has been living in. Nobody is shouting. Listen, the first part of getting your mind together is wrapped up in your own initiative. You got to want to be free from what you're doing wrong. See, change cannot be forced. It can't be based on the desire of mama or daddy or somebody who loves or cares for you. It must be something that you feel you must make your move on yourself. I can't make you lose weight. I can't make you go to the gym. I can't make you stop eating the wrong thing. I can only tell you. But if you want to get fine like your pastor, you're going to learn how to go to somebody's gym. You're going to learn how to eat right, and you're going to learn how to go every day. Or y'all don't have to talk if you don't want to. Which means back in my native state, Louisiana, grandmother who's gone now used to say, y'all done heard it before, you can take a horse to water. Oh, y'all got it right. Y'all got it right. I can pray for you, but unless you see that you need it for yourself, my prayers in vain. Verse 6. Look at the text. Look at the text. It says, when he came out, he worshiped. Isn't that what the text says? When he came out, he worshiped. Look at the text. When he came out, he worshiped. But watch this. Demons recognized, but they didn't worship. Can I say that again? Because y'all didn't catch it. When the man came out, he worshiped. Look at the text. Demons recognized who Jesus was, but they didn't worship. I wonder why. Demons' main goal is for you to worship them, which means it's not the demons that's worshiping, but the man who has the demons that's worshiping. Woo. Inside of the man is the demons, but the man is worshiping anyhow, because he has that innate nature to want to worship God no matter how bad he has been influenced or controlled over. Oh, help me. Is there anybody in here, you've been going through, any veteran Christians in here who can really testify, all I need is a piece of my mind? Because if I have a piece of sanity, I'll learn how to worship Jesus anyhow. If I just have a little bit of sense, all I need is just a bit of sense to run to him and to worship him. For they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Let the redeemed of the Lord. The next thought. Look at the text. When he came to worship, he cried with a loud voice. You know what it says? Look at verse 1 through 5. It tells us what he did. It says, all night and day he was crying out. Now, it's the same Greek word that really got me. It really caught me, brother pastors, associate pastors. It caught me because the text says he was crying out all day and night. But then when you look at the Greek word, which is used later, it says he hollered with a loud voice to Jesus. Y'all missed it. Before he met Jesus, he was hollering with a loud voice. After he meets Jesus, he is hollering with a loud voice. Y'all didn't get it. Let me click rewind. The text says before he met Jesus, he hollered with a loud voice. After he meets Jesus, he shouts and hollers the same way, which means I get tired of all these, I call them bourgeois, stuck-up Christians. Church folk who after they get saved act like they have to be so quiet. They look at you as though you're crazy while you get your praise on. But before they met Jesus, they partied in the club, they shouted at the parties, But there are some folk who say if I can be loud before I was saved, I think I can be loud after I'm saved. Y'all don't have to talk if you don't want. Now, if I can be a sinner and shout, I can be a saint and shout all at the same time. If I can be loud at a game, I can be loud in church. If I can be loud at the pool hall, I can be loud in church. Everything that had breath ought to praise the Lord. Y'all sit down. I ain't through yet. Y'all sit down. I ain't through yet. Unless you want me to stop. Look, I feel pretty good even though I'm sick. Look at the text. It says, the man comes out of the tomb and meets Jesus at the shore, which means other people are around. Hello, somebody. Well, I'm going somewhere. This man is not the only man or the only one that sees Jesus. I'm getting ready to throw a curve. So for me, the man, Patrick, is not really crazy. He's not the crazy one. Everybody else is crazy because the man is the only one who's running to Jesus. Y'all in here. Now watch the text, watch the text, watch the text. The man is cut up, he's bloody and in pain. But with all of that, he runs to Jesus to worship. I wonder how many of us are in pain and run to Jesus with worshiping instead of complaining. Oh, help me. Now here comes the lesson. Here comes the lesson. Which means sometimes you must learn how to worship while you're wounded. Y'all. I say it. One must learn how to worship while you are wounded. I'm going to say it one more time. One must learn how to worship while you are wounded. Can I get y'all to say that? One must how to while you are. How many of us have been practicing that one? Now watch this. The man is bruised. Look at the text. The man is bruised from self-inflicted wounds. He's cut on himself because of self-destructive behavior. He has pain from the way he has mistreated himself, and yet with all the wounds, he still worships God. This is a very important lesson because some folk allow being wounded to control who they are. These folk worship at the altar of wounds. I say they worship at the altar of wounds. And they begin, watch this, they begin to perfect the spirit of victimization to the extent where they get this sick, dysfunctional pleasure out of the attention their wounds get them from other people. So they really don't want to be healed because healing steals attention from them. These wounds become their personality. The church, you ever notice the church can be in total praise. And some folk just sitting there with their arms folded, their legs crossed, looking around to see who's looking at them, hoping somebody will come up to them and say, "Baby, what's wrong?" They worship their wounds so much until all they talk about is who mistreated them, what they are going through. I ain't been to church in a while. I've been going through so much. I just didn't want you to see how I am and what I was going through. Everything they're going through is somebody else's fault, never their fault. Everything they're dealing with is because what somebody else did to them, what the church did to them. But I stopped by here on my way to heaven to tell you there is a healing balm. And that healing balm is in Gilead. And the name is Jesus. When you go as wounded, you are and still know how to give him praise. No. I'll never forget the best worship I ever did was when I was wounded. I'm going to say it one more time. The best worship I ever did was not when I got the new car, not when I got married, not when I got a better house. None of that mattered. The best time that I ever worshiped God was when I found myself wounded, when I found myself in trouble. That was the best time that I ever worshiped God. I thought I wasn't going to get well. I thought I'd never get another job. That's when I worshiped God. But all I can tell you is that when I came into the presence of the Lord and I had that God relationship, all I can tell you is that God blessed me. Now look at the text. Look at the text. And this one, this one here, if you don't remember any of them, the last two I tell you, I really want you to remember. The text tells us, if you're going to get delivered from the wrong stuff trying to control your mind and your life, you must stop dealing with the symptoms and start dealing with the source. I think I just said a word. I said in order to be delivered, one must stop just dealing with the symptoms and start dealing with the source. Look at verses 3 and 4. The reason the people couldn't cure him was because they were trying to do things to stop the symptoms. The man was cutting himself, so they tried to tie him up to deal with the symptoms. Look at the text. He was hollowing, so they tried to tame him by tying him up, trying to deal with the symptoms. Which means a whole lot of folk never get delivered because you deal with your symptoms, but don't deal with the source. See, you thought your problem was men, so you shouted because you became delivered from having to go from man to man. But because you didn't deal with the source, now you don't go from man to man. You go from store to store. Because your problem wasn't needing a man. Your problem was your insecurity. You needed affirmation that you dealt with a symptom but didn't deal with the source. Now get this one. Get this one good. Many of us are still sick, even though we have been delivered from symptoms, because we never dealt with the source. Why is it that some of our prayers haven't been answered? Y'all know the answer. I just been telling it to you. You're sitting there like you don't know it. You've been dealing with the and not the. Now, look how Jesus, look at the text a couple of more times, and I'm going to sit down and shut up. Look how Jesus makes the man deal with the source. Jesus says, what's your name? It's in the text. Look at the text. Jesus says, what is your name? Now get this, get this. Jesus does this because he wanted the man to tell him what his habit or his problem was. You wondering why God hasn't delivered you from whatever you're going through? He's waiting on you to tell him the name of your problem. Think about it. Dealing with drugs? Name it. Dealing with sickness? Name it when you pray. Dealing with grief? Name it. Dealing with being dysfunctional? Name it. Finances are wrecked? Name it. Suicidal? Name it. Because the only way to take authority over whatever your problem is to call it by its name. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. Watch this. Watch this. In Genesis, God says to Adam, you name all the what? Animals. And am I right? How many agree with that? You name all the animals. Now, but here comes the bad part. And whatever you call them, that is their what? Watch this. Watch this. But the next statement, Adam, after naming it, you have authority over it. Y'all ain't shouting. Which means the very minute I call its name, I start to take authority over it, because when I call its name, I'm letting it know that I have the right to get rid. Y'all ain't up in here. Lying, call it by its name. Adultery, call it by its name. I know I'm preaching. Might not be able to preach the way I really want to preach it because of the way I feel, but I still know I'm preaching. David says, create in me a clean heart and renew within me the right spirit. Call it by its name. Can I preach one more thing? Or should I save it for after camp meet? Here we go. One more thing about this text. You know, we shout over the part where it says he was found clothed and in his right mind and sitting at the feet of Jesus. That's a good thing to shout about. But the part I love to shout about is the part where Jesus says to the man, since you have named it, you have conquered it. But here's what I want you to do. Go home and tell it to the other folk who know your history, who say, I remember when you go back home and say to the folk who know your failures, who knew your dysfunctions, let them see how different you are. And when they see how different you are, they're going to ask, what happened to you? That's when you tell them you turn to the source of your problem instead of a solution. In other words, God will give you a moment to praise his name. God will allow you to bump into people who you used to get high with. God will allow you to run into folk who you used to club with, who you used to drink with, even folk who you used to sleep with. Is it all right? Is it all right if I I tell the story the way the old preacher used to tell it. The man said, I was on a downward road. No hat on my head, no shoes on my feet, no God on my side, and no heaven in my view. I was too mean to live and not fit enough to die. The handcuffs of hell on my hands, the shackles of damnation on my feet. But the Lord spoke peace to my dying soul, turned me around, cut loose my stammering tongue, and sent me on my way. And ever since that day, I've been sometimes rising and sometimes falling. But I made my vow to the Lord. I ain't gonna turn around no more. The text says the last time I saw the man, he was on his way back home. His eyes were clear with sight and insight. His body was straight. The scars of dull and dirty needles had been washed away from his body. He was no longer the vehicle of dope, but the instrument of hope. He was on his way home. His children saw him walking and laughed and said, that's my daddy. His wife looked at him and saw him and said, that's my husband. He met a man named Jesus. Is there anybody up in here who has met a man named Jesus? If you met a man named Jesus, won't you get on your feet? Clap your hands and say, thank you, Lord. I met a man named Jesus. He woke me up this morning. I met a man named Jesus. He started me on my way. I met a man named Jesus. He fixed my problems. I met a man named Jesus. He loved me when I was unlovable. I met a man named Jesus. When my friends put me down, I met a man named Jesus. That's the man that I love. That's the man that'll fix it when nobody else can fix it. That's the man named Jesus. And because of that, this man sings this little song. Goes like this. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. What's his name? Can y'all do that again? Come on, sing. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Yeah. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. That's it. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. What's his name, y'all? Jesus is his name. What about Master? Master, Master, Master. That's it. Master, Master, Master. That's it. Master, Master, Master. But what's his name, y'all? Jesus is his name. When I'm sick, he's a doctor. Doctor, doctor, doctor. Come on now. Doctor, doctor, doctor. Oh, yeah. Doctor, doctor, doctor. But what's his name, y'all? When you need a lawyer, he's a what? Lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. What's his name, y'all? Jesus is his name. Let's do it one more time. Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. What's his name, y'all? Oh, Jesus is his name. Let's do it like you mean it now. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. That's it. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Oh, Jesus is his name. Now listen.